What is going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. Recently, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia signed the Strategic Mutual Defense Agreement. Basically, this says that any attack on Pakistan or Saudi Arabia is going to be considered an attack on both of the countries simultaneously. It also provides a provision which gives Pakistan the ability to deploy its nuclear weapons in defense of Saudi Arabia. Some news outlets have dubbed this the Islamic NATO in response to the attacks on Qatar by Israel, but I personally don't think that it's going to be limited to countries that are purely Islamic. If you recall, Saudi Arabia and Iran, two majority Muslim countries, don't have the best relations. And Saudi Arabia has explicitly stated that if Iran was capable of possessing nuclear weapons, then Saudi Arabia would also have to come into possession of nuclear weapons.
At the move, and you don't need to get a nuclear weapon because you cannot use it. Even if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, any country use a nuclear weapon, that means they are having a war with the rest of the world. The world cannot see another Hiroshima. If the world see 100,000 people dead, that means you are in a war with the rest of the world. So it's a useless effort to reach a nuclear weapon because you cannot use it. If you use it, you got to have a big fight with the rest of the world.
If they get one, will you?
If they get one, we have to get one for security reasons, for balancing power in the Middle East, but we don't.
The thing that makes this particular agreement kind of interesting and why I think it's offering not just Islamic countries, but could potentially offer African countries and maybe even a third way outside of the BRICS, NATO-US hegemony dichotomy, is the fact that Pakistan is what's called an MNNA, which is a major non-NATO ally of the United States. Yet it also maintains fairly good relations with China. And there are numerous other MNNAs in the Middle East region. Egypt's one, Jordan is one, and in Sub-Saharan Africa, there's Kenya. So in June of 2024, Kenya became the 20th major non-NATO US ally.
I'm proud to announce we're working with Congress to designate Kenya a major non-NATO ally.
And Kenya is actually the only country in Sub-Saharan Africa to hold that designation. What it basically means is that Kenya has certain privileges when it comes to the purchasing of weapons and other business interests that deal with the United States. Conversely, Pakistan has been an MNNA since 2002 when the United States needed Pakistan's assistance in the global war on terror in going into Afghanistan. Now, Osama bin Laden hiding out in Pakistan and the ISI's knowledge of that notwithstanding, Pakistan has been able to maintain its MNNA status. They've been able to receive billions in economic aid from the United States and around $62 billion for the Chinese-Pakistan economic corridor from China. So they've been able to kind of straddle the line between both the United States and China and still maintain good relations. Additionally, Kenya has been able to be part of China's Belt and Road Initiative with the standard gauge railway investments, and they've also been participating in military exercises with the United States, like Justified Accord. Outside of Kenya and Pakistan's MNNA status, there's other historical reasons why the countries could end up working together in the future. So if you're unfamiliar with the history of British colonialism, in 1996, when the Brits wanted to build the Kenyan-Ugandan Railway, they imported 32,000 workers from what was then British India. The descendants of those people number about 90,000 today. And in 2017, the Kenyan government officially recognized South Asians as a collective group. That means people from Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh as Kenya's 44th tribe.
Now, Kenyans of Asian heritage have been gazetted as the country's 44th tribe in a Gazette notice dated July the 22nd. President Uhuru Kenyatta termed the community as an integral part of the national fabric. Early this year, Farah Manzoor, a human rights activist, said she has been seeking the inclusivity of the Asian community as Kenyans for 5 years. She met members of the Asian community in January to brief them about the petition. Those in the meeting were Hindus, Muslims, both Sunni and Shia, and Sikhs.
Raisi Uhuru tunakushukuru, hapa tuko kwetu, Wahindi wa Kenya.
You might not see so many of them living in Nairobi like I do, but if you go to Mombasa, there's a very, very large South Asian community. You also have to realize Kenya has a very large Muslim population. It's around 10% of the total population, and something like 8 of the counties in Kenya actually have a Muslim majority. So historically and demographically, Kenya already has some level of relation to what's going on in South Asia. And if you know anything about Kenya's history, the number of tribes that already exist, if you recall, like I said, 44, Kenya has been able to manage the diversity of its people incredibly well when compared to other countries in the region. So obviously this agreement isn't just about military stuff. There's planned investments that will be going in between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. And Kenya getting in on that is something that I think is a very reasonable possibility. If you know what's going on in Saudi Arabia, they're currently building up towards this Vision 2030. It's this $3.6 trillion overall infrastructure and development program. They're building that long glass city, I think it's called Neom or something like that. That's gonna need workers, that's gonna need natural resources. Kenya already does about $450 million a year in trade with Saudi Arabia. And as a member of the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act group of countries, Kenya could act as a hub, exporting more agricultural products to Saudi Arabia as it grows as part of this Project 2030 initiative. Moving back to the military side of things, I personally think that this defense agreement could really benefit from having Kenya as part of it, because Kenyans have already demonstrated that they have the capability to lead complex defense and peacekeeping operations. If you're unfamiliar with what happened in Haiti, Kenya was able to deploy around 800 police officers there to help with stability and peacekeeping operations at the behest of the United Nations and the United States. Now, as an American, and for Americans, that might seem rather trivial because the United States deploys our troops all over the world all the time. But expeditionary military and police operations are actually quite complex and very, very hard to manage. Even though Kenya did receive a lot of logistical support from the United States and the United Nations, the ability that they were able to conduct the operations at all, that the police were trained well enough to do that type of work, is impressive in and of itself. I don't think that Pakistan or Saudi Arabia have that kind of expeditionary military experience, at least not within the last several decades. I mean, Haiti is like 14,000 kilometers from Kenya. You know, being able to maintain communications and coordinate operations is very, very difficult over that distance. So the fact that Kenya has had the experience doing that would provide a lot of benefit to mutual defense pacts such as the one signed between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. The thing that I think ultimately serves this kind of agreement more, though, is the fact that it offers a third way path separate from the BRICS, China, Russia, Western, US, NATO hegemony dichotomy. If you've been watching the news, there's been a lot of talk about African countries moving to BRICS and the United States disliking that, the dumping of the US dollar as the reserve currency. There's a lot of talk about that. And I think diplomatically, ultimately it'll be better if countries kind of do their own thing and manage to play nice with both sides than just out and out picking one or the other. For example, global approval of the United States has dropped significantly. In 2015, it was around 66%, and now it's like 42%, which is pretty big. And then when you look at things like Pew Research study, which finds that 19 out of 24 of the United States' current allies don't have trust in the current administration, you know, the opinion of the global world towards the United States is just severely declined. And it's gonna take years to gain that trust back. Years that countries aren't gonna necessarily wanna spend putting all their eggs in the American basket. On the flip side, while BRICS does offer an alternative, it's around 40% of the global population and about 25% of global GDP. It's still not quite as stable as the current American hegemony and US, Euro, NATO sphere. Remember, BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, and China, but China and India are still fighting over the Kashmir region. I think 2020 was the last major clash they had where several soldiers died. Russia is still bogged down in Ukraine. I don't really understand how BRICS can be seen as a reasonable alternative when there's a lot of infighting amongst the countries that are allegedly part of and leading this initiative. And if you look at Kenya, they haven't exactly played nice with either sphere of influence's initiatives. Recently, Kenya voted with the majority of the General Assembly in recognizing an elevated state of Palestinian statehood, and Kenya has also publicly condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Kenya is gravely concerned by the announcement made by the Russian Federation to recognize Donetsk and Luhansk regions of Ukraine as independent states. In our considered view, this action and announcement breaches the territorial integrity of Ukraine.
Honestly, the part that I think is going to play the biggest role in potentially increasing Kenya's importance in potentially joining an agreement like this is the moving of many UN services to Nairobi. So by 2026, the UN is going to be moving UNICEF, the UN Women's Organization, and the UN People or Populations Forum from New York to Kenya, which will make Nairobi only the 4th city and the only one in Africa that hosts multiple UN agencies. I think in general, the Global South kind of realizes that there's a lot going on in both the Far East and the West that they don't necessarily want to be a part of. Both of those regions are facing severe population and demographic crises, and neither region or sphere has shown any real openness to immigration from the Global South. You can almost kind of think of this defense agreement and the potential expansion of economic opportunities as a neo-post-Cold War non-aligned movement.
The non-aligned movement has a history going back more than 50 years. The bloc was founded in Belgrade in 1961 by India, Indonesia, Egypt, Ghana and Yugoslavia. It was a product of the Cold War between superpowers the US and the Soviet Union. The members wanted to charge a more middle course, focusing on the developing world. The group says it's opposed to what it calls imperialism, foreign aggression and power politics. Today it's going to include 120 members who meet every 3 or 4 years.
Which, again, if you don't know, the Non-Aligned Movement Summit was held last year in January in Kampala, Uganda, Kenya's northern neighbor. So the region is kind of already ripe for moving forward in not getting involved in China, Russia, European and American, gobbledygook, just taking care of each other, making sure each other is safe, and building themselves up economically. So what do you guys think? Do you think that this new defense agreement could be potentially the start of a new non-aligned third wave movement that offers potential to East Africa and potentially the rest of the African continent? Or do you think it's just something to keep Muslim countries safe from Israel?